I'll just kick things off, Amanda, by saying a massive thank you to you for giving us some of your time this Thursday morning and joining us for a show of The Responsible Edge. I know you and I connected, it feels like a few months ago now, and obviously through the work that you were doing at the CIOB. Really delighted to have convinced you to come on. Thank you for joining us today.
You make it sound like you had to twist my arm. No, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and chat to you today. I'm absolutely delighted to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Brilliant, Amanda. And just to say, for anyone else in the room, like, we have got a third guest who's on the show today. Casper, the dog, is in the office that Amanda's sitting in at the moment. If Casper decides that he's got anything particular to say on the green skills gap, he will be jumping in. So just for anybody out there that's wary of a dog getting involved during the show. Amanda, let's kick things off though. As I mentioned to you, really keen to learn a little bit more and share for our listeners a little bit more about you and your background. Some of our guests choose to start like right at the beginning, the early inspirations during childhood, etc., that led them to ultimately be passionate about the areas that they ultimately went into in terms of their work. Others start perhaps a little bit more conventionally towards, higher education and beyond. But take us back to the beginning. Like, when did you first sort of realize that doing something in sort of an impactful role such as sustainability? When did that become important to you?
Um, I think I am going to take you back to when I was a child, actually, and I've been passionate about the environment since I was quite small, and I think that's because I grew up on a farm, a really small farm, like a hobby farm, really, not one which was making any money, but just something that we enjoyed running as a family. And so
Mhm.
I spent much of my time in nature. My dad was really interested in the natural environment, and that probably sparked an interest in me. And then that went on really to expand further at secondary school,
Mhm.
where I was really keen on geography and had a particularly inspiring geography teacher that helped that grow into a bigger interest and kind of planted the seeds that developed into, a bit of environmental campaigning as a sixth former and eventually a career choice.
Mm.
But it's probably
Brilliant.
important to say, actually, sorry to talk across you, that,
Yeah.
I didn't go straight into an environmental career. Um, it wasn't my first career. And despite that early interest, I actually started my working life as a news journalist. And I was kind of pushed in that direction, I guess, by, teachers and careers advice because I was quite good at writing. Um,
Mhm.
but it became clear to me at a really early stage in that career that it wasn't a good career choice. It didn't kind of sit well with my ethical values, I guess. And so, although it provided me with some great transferable skills that I still use today, I decided that that wasn't the job for me.
Amanda, I've got a few things already that I want to sort of pick out, and I think what's brilliant is how you've mentioned the experience that you had with an inspirational teacher at school, at secondary school, and the impact that that had on you, and obviously the nature of what we're going to talk about today. I think that's a fascinating insight into what drove you and inspired you to ultimately follow your career path. So I want to ask you about that, but I also want to ask you about that. You mentioned those ethical values. Like, what were those ethical values that being a journalist, that just weren't aligned with the way that you saw the world?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking me to look back to ancient times now, but basically, it was really around some discomfort about some of the things that you're asked to do as a news journalist, and obviously, this was over 20 years ago now, so I can't speak to what the industry is like now.
Of course.
um, but certainly I was uncomfortable with some of the things that I was asked to do as a news journalist, reporting on local news even.
Hmm.
And so it just didn't sit comfortably with me, really. And I think also, whilst I enjoyed writing, it just didn't kind of light a fire in me doing that. And I think it is really important to go into a career which gives you a sense of purpose and gets you excited to get up each day and go to work, and which you really believe in, so that when it's difficult, and working in sustainability can be really difficult, you've got that impact that you're having to look to keep you going through the tougher times. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense, Amanda. Like, that sense of, like, resilience in your career decision that's sort of propped up, if you like, by this fundamental alignment between the work you're doing and the values that you hold. I think that, like, that, to be honest, rings so true. It's something that rings so true. That's a really interesting insight, and again, relevant to what we're going to come on to talk about. Let me ask you. You've we've had our inspirational secondary school teacher who's kind of lit that fire in you regarding sustainability, but you obviously had the previous experience of growing up in nature and experiencing, the countryside and everything that went with that. You now become a bit disillusioned with the role as a news journalist, and you're now looking to decide what to do next. Like, how did sustainability and what was your next role? Like, how did that part of your career sort of play out?
Well, I went back to my studies first and foremost, and reading geography and environment in the hope that I could find a job I'd be more passionate about, basically. Um, and and during the time that I was studying, I was working in various admin roles, including in a university. And actually, when I'd completed my degree, I went on to work as a research assistant for education for sustainable development at the same university, Bournemouth University, and later became their first ever environmental officer. And I worked there for about 10 years, eventually leading a team of environmental professionals. I think there were 5 of us in the end. And I was their environment and energy manager at that time. And we took the university to the top 10 in the Green League. So it was really opportune, actually, that a place where I'd been supporting myself through my studies,
Mm.
by working in administrative roles there, had opportunities just at the time that I was graduating.
And I love. Do you know what's amazing, Amanda? Is how many guests we have coming on who, when you talk about when they reflect and look back at their experience, there is a lot of that right place, right time. The sort of
Yeah.
just the opportunity presented itself, and it's fascinating to understand the amount of sort of well, I guess good fortune that goes into, like, the opportunities that present themselves to people. Let me ask you, when you began that sort of 10-year stint of working at the university, like, you mentioned that looking back on news journalism, it didn't really light your fire. Like, what was the experience like of finding something that did, and what was it that made you feel like you were passionate, you were enthused, you were energized in the role?
I think that's a really good question. And I guess you just feel like you found a home, from a professional sense when you finally find a role that you can really get excited about. And there was plenty of opportunity, so plenty to stimulate me in terms of the challenge in that role. And also, it was a time during which higher education were quite focused on sustainability and environmental management, really
Mm,
driven by requirements from the Higher Education Funding Council. So again, there's like an element of opportunity there, good luck and serendipity, if you like, that you were pushing on an open door, really. And so we were able to make some early momentum and build the team and go on to, achieve a good level of success, which was, fantastic, because in many sectors at that time you would have been really, trying to push a big boulder up a very steep hill, no doubt. And in education, they were always ahead of the game on this topic, to be quite honest.
and out of interest, you were leading that initiative over those 10 years, and ultimately ended up having your team working with you. What was it like to be the first environmental officer, and to sort of, because looking back at what you'd done up to that point, you hadn't perhaps led something and been the kind of, yeah, the sort of the driving force, if you like, behind something of that nature. So what was that like for you?
Well, I think often in sustainability roles, you're starting with a blank piece of paper.
Hmm.
And actually, I think that's something that I find quite exciting. So it was good to be able to, put systems in place, build the team, and so much low hanging fruit as well when you're the first one taking on a role. So I think
Mm.
I always found that quite stimulating. And it's not the only time in my career that I've had a fairly blank piece of paper to work with. And that would be common to many people working in this kind of role. Um, and actually, after 10 years of working there, and doing all of that kind of building, um, I guess I reached a point where I was ready for a really completely different role. And actually,
Mhm.
I worked for a member of the European Parliament, and a Green member of the European Parliament, as my next job during the Brexit period. So that was an interesting period
Mhm.
before later returning to be a sustainability practitioner
Mhm.
in land and facilities management in the defence sector, and then head of sustainability in a multinational manufacturing firm. So during that period, I've had a number of opportunities to put new systems in place, build new teams, and um, and also kind of overhaul existing systems too.
Mm.
And those are key skills for anyone working in this kind of area.
Amanda, can I just pick up on that? Because we had, I think it was Dax Lovegrove came on the show a few episodes ago. Obviously, done some fairly senior sustainability roles at Jimmy Choo and Versace and a few others. He made a really interesting point about the way that he viewed his role. He viewed his role as being one that should essentially become, I think he said redundant, but I think he was saying that for effect. But essentially, he aimed for like a 3 year, you know, get in, establish the strategy, that blank piece of paper, establish what needs to be done, implement across the organization, embed across the organization, and then essentially the role of the head of sustainability at that stage should essentially be almost realized. I probably butchered that. Dax is probably listening in thinking Charlie's absolutely portrayed me terribly there. But the essence of that, of the role needing to kind of take on less and less significance over time, has that played out in your experience, or have I just introduced something that's very silly indeed?
No, not at all. I mean, I think that that resonates to some extent. I think that it's ambitious to believe that the embedding element of that will be done and dusted in a short time period. I think my experience suggests that actually that can take a lot longer than you
Mm,
anticipate. But there's absolutely some sense in what you're saying around, the role being to put the systems in place, um, to provide the tools, if you like, to the organization for them to then go ahead and run with it, because actually, we can't rely on sustainability practitioners to solve this for us operating in silos. It has to be embedded in everything we do, in all of our processes and in everybody's roles.
mm.
But that bit does take longer in some organizations than in others, I would say.
That's a very fair comment, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense of that. I do just want to peer back slightly to your experience of working in politics. Can we head back there? I'd be really fascinated to know. You know, you've worked in news journalism. You've then gone in and become a sustainability lead at a higher education organization. You then go into the political sphere. Like, what was that like? What were the nuances, what were the sort of initial experiences that you had and takeaways that you left with when you worked in politics?
Well, obviously, it's very different to being a practitioner, but I think in my mind, I felt that there was an opportunity. If you have an opportunity to influence policy at that level, then that could have a much bigger impact. But the period that I was working there coincided with the run into the Brexit referendum.
Mm,
I was working for a Green member of the European Parliament, so she was very much pro-Remain. And that was aligned with my position. So that was something that I could be quite passionate about and really support with the campaign and so on. But also, it was a really challenging, divisive time to be in European politics,
mm,
and quite an unpleasant time to be in European politics in many ways in this country. So there was lots of opportunities to work not just on policy, but also on regional liaison. It was a period which was really exciting in that the MEP in question, Molly Scott Cato, was a professor of economics, green economics. So, loads to learn from her in terms of her subject matter expertise, and a really inspiring woman in terms of her drive and motivation and work rate.
mm, mhm,
But also, yeah, really, really challenging time to work in politics. And I think the conclusion I came to was that actually that wasn't for me, and that I wanted to return to being a practitioner. And obviously, those jobs were going to go because of the decision that the UK took in relation to our membership of the European Parliament anyway.
mhm. And Amanda, and that was Yeah, I'm sort of shivering as I look back on that period as well, and can imagine you sitting there in the European Parliament dealing with these things on the ground. What were the kind of key lessons when you went back into being a sustainability practitioner? What were the key lessons, the key kind of learnings that you took from your experience in politics? Was there anything that you took forward with you that helped you with your subsequent roles?
Oh, you learn stuff from every role that you undertake, right? And I guess resilience was an important takeaway from that role, as was communication and collaboration. I think the other thing that was really important from that role was working in the Southwest region that Molly represented and getting voices from people across the region, hearing about what they were doing on sustainability and what we could learn from that, and also
Hmm.
how policy was going to impact them in a practical sense. And I think you can take that into an organization as well, because actually, perhaps the most important thing you can do as a sustainability practitioner when you join a new business is to listen. And most importantly, listen not necessarily to the head office functions around you, but to the people on the ground in the operations. And I think listening to people in an operational context, understanding how the policies that you might be wanting to implement and embed within the organization are going to have an impact on them at ground level, so that you can make sure that they're workable and you're going to get the buy-in through that engagement is really critical. And that's something I've definitely taken with me into the roles that I've had since then.
I love that, Amanda. That literally came up as one of the kind of key takeaways from a show that we did yesterday. So I love how there's commonality in this position, which is brilliant. Let me ask you now. I want to you brilliantly sort of condensed the next phase, if you like, in your career, but just touch upon perhaps where the role that you're now in and what you're focusing on at the moment.
Yeah, so the role at CIOB is a really interesting one, because unlike my last head of sustainability role, which was in a global business, but we were very much focused on the impact of the organization itself,
Hmm.
and reducing that impact. This role is more about influencing an industry, I guess, and working with our members to help them through the sustainability transition that they need to make. So here at the CIOB, I'm working across all of our different directorates, whether it's with our colleagues in membership or marketing and communications or policy, to make sure that we're addressing sustainability in everything that we do and embedding it in everything we do, but for the benefit of our members and the wider industry. So the emphasis is slightly different, it's fair to say, but of course the opportunity is huge, because we have 50,000 members across the world, not just in the UK. We're an international organisation again, and those members are working in all corners of the built environment industry. So by working with them, influencing them, providing them with the tools that they need, the CPD that they need, supporting them through our interactions with policymakers, then the scale of the potential impact is huge.
And was that out of interest, Amanda? And that, by the way, that was so beautifully introduced. Was that the key driver for you in joining that the potential impact of the work that you could do with the CIOB?
It was certainly a key driver, yeah. I mean, I think there are a number of things that you're looking for, aren't there, when you're moving into a new organization. Certainly for me, the potential impact is a huge one. Also, is it going to be aligned with my purpose? CIOB is a charitable organization. It has really good values. It has an excellent leader, a female CEO who is hugely supportive and wonderful to work with. All of those things are part of the picture, I think. And also, the opportunity, not just in terms of the role, but the industry context as well,
Mhm.
where there are some wonderful examples of best practice on sustainability, and there are also some examples where organizations need more help with this area. So there's a big opportunity there too.
I love that, Amanda. And your this is brilliant. Before we started the show, Amanda shivered at the idea that we were going to spend 20 minutes talking about her. We've already spent 20 minutes talking about you, Amanda, and it's been absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure our listeners are fascinated at somebody with your experience and understanding exactly the pivots and the directions shifts that you've had throughout your career. I've got to ask you one more question, and it's a question that's perhaps difficult to answer, but and I think I know where you're going to go with it. But if I was to ask you, Amanda, at the end of your career, if you were looking back on what you've done throughout it, what do you want to be able to say about what you did?
That is a difficult one to answer because there's a number of things I'd want to be able to say. I think one of the things that's really important to me and has been throughout my career, and first and foremost, is that I want to be able to say that I've been authentic. And so, working in environments which allow you to be authentic, um, bring your whole self to work, be yourself is really important to me. I think the other thing I'm gonna give to, if that's okay,
No, that's
is
fine.
is is probably the one that you're expecting, which is around, have I made an impact? And I think for many of us working in sustainability, who've been working in sustainability for a long period of time, you know you're making an impact, but you also feel like you're not making enough impact.
Mm,
After 20 years, I have days where I sit down and think, oh my God, we're failing.
mm.
And other days where I think that was a good win. And so I really hope that by the end of my career, and I don't want to have to go on too long to achieve this, so if everyone could just hurry up now, that would be good. Then, by the end of my career, I want to feel like the balance is that we made a positive impact and that things are going in the right direction. But with the challenges that we face, it's an uphill battle right now.
Indeed, indeed. I love that as a call to arms. We all just need to hurry up a little bit so that we can Amanda can get to the end of her career and feel like the impact has been done. I say tongue cheek. Amanda, that was absolutely brilliant, and thank you for being so open and sharing. As I say, your fascinating career kind of with us. So I really appreciate it. Let's move on to kind of the next sort of section of the show. And can I ask you to introduce the article in the University College of Estate Management website? I think it was October this month, 2024, published. Would you mind just introducing it to our listeners and perhaps just pulling out whatever the most kind of interesting points were within that piece for you?
Yeah, sure. So the article was called "What is the Green Skills Gap and Why Does It Matter?" Really topical for the built environment industry right now. So great choice. The article kind of defined the green skills gap as the shortage of workers needed to fill incoming jobs created by the green transition. And I thought that was an interesting definition, and perhaps we'll come back to that afterwards. It highlighted some of the causes of this gap, and actually, some of the causes that they identified are true of a broader skills gap in the construction industry in general, stuff around demographics and the need for more diversity and inclusion. Um, and the article listed 10 green skills, I think it was, that the built environment industry needed, including things like critical thinking and digital skills, which I would perhaps say are transferable skills, and some possible solutions to close the gap, including grants and incentives for studying green skills. So, as I said, a really hot topic for the construction industry, and much of the content really resonated with me.
Mhm.
And it's probably also going to be interesting to reflect on some things that weren't covered as strongly as perhaps they could have been.
Fantastic, Amanda. That was a brilliant introduction, and I can't normally. I need to add a bit more, but no, that was absolutely perfect. You mentioned the definition of the green skills of green skills. Can you just touch upon your observation that perhaps that was too much of a narrow definition, perhaps?
Yeah, so as I said, the definition they used was around green skills being the shortage of workers needed to fill incoming jobs that have been created by the green transition. What we might refer to as green jobs, I guess, or specialist roles in sustainability. And I don't disagree with that at all. Examples of those kind of roles include the demand for retrofit coordinators or, I don't know, biodiversity net gain specialists. And that's absolutely correct. There is a skills gap in relation to those roles. In fact, I think LinkedIn's global stock take that they did recently on climate related talent, I forget the name of it, said that the demand for candidates for green jobs was more than double the supply currently. But I think that's only part of the picture. As I alluded to in the bit where we were talking about my career to date, this transition won't be delivered by people in green jobs alone. It
Mm.
will be delivered when we realise that we all need to play our part, and sustainability is embedded in all of our roles. And in construction, there is also a potential green skills gap rather among many existing trades. Um, where new technical skills, knowledge, and capabilities may be required to use different, more sustainable technologies or materials, new practices such as modern methods of construction, and so on. So I think where I'm coming from is, yeah, the green jobs bit is definitely part of the green skills gap, but it's also the green skills that we need in all of our roles, no matter what you do. Um, it is also part of the picture.
And Amanda, can I dive into that? And this is going to be in danger of me asking some very silly questions. So if it needs to be edited out, we'll definitely get on that. Like, what does that describe to me perhaps an example that you can share? What that actually means? Like, if somebody within an organization was they're not in a green job, but they're looking to develop and evolve their green skills. Like, can we just take an example and express how somebody that is in a sort of more traditional role, how they would develop their green skills or how they utilize them?
Yeah, so let's just perhaps talk about what green skills are first of all, and then
Mhm.
I'll answer that if that's okay.
Brilliant.
So I think we can distinguish between two kinds of green skills. There's kind of transferable skills and competencies, and those are things like leadership for sustainable development, which we might be seen as a slightly different style of leadership than traditional leadership. Things
Mhm.
like critical thinking, influencing skills, um, collaboration and partnerships, and so on. And then there's the more kind of technical skills that are also in high demand and short supply. And, let's give an example now, because that's what you asked me for. So for example, retrofit of existing buildings is a
Mhm.
massive topic for the built environment industry. Some estimates suggest that we might need as many as 500,000 skilled workers to be able to retrofit all of our existing buildings by 2030, which is, a key milestone on the way to net zero. Some
Mhm.
of the skills they need are those transferable skills. So, for example, they might need project management skills or really good communication skills to liaise with householders and building occupants, or whatever. But these workers also need to understand building physics, and they may be working on homes that are traditional built homes. So I'm coming to you now from my home office, which is in a 1860s rural cottage. 20% of our homes are built prior to 1919. And so people who are going to be retrofitting those homes also need to understand about heritage legislation, building pathology, traditional materials and methods of construction, taking a whole building approach so that the interventions that we take, such as insulating the building, don't create unintended consequences like damp in the building, for
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
So, and some of these workers are from familiar trades, right? They may be plumbers or heating and ventilation specialists, electricians, I don't know, window fitters, loft insulators, if that's a job. People who are doing those things, and many of those are in short supply already for building
Mhm.
new homes, and they're going to need slightly different skills for retrofitting existing homes. So I guess I've managed to provide an example there by accident, which actually demonstrates that we need people in specific green jobs, but we also need people in existing trades to have those green skills as well. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense, Amanda. That was perfect. You thank you for explaining it in a way that I could chew upon. That was brilliant. Um, Let me ask you the kind of the I know the article alludes to its sort of assertions on this, but from your perspective, like, what is it down to? What why are we experiencing the green skills gap that we are, and specifically in the construction sector?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it is an interesting one. And the article talks about some things that I would say are reasonably sort of generic to a skills gap in general.
Mm, mm,
And they're not wrong at all. They're certainly part of the picture. So, for example, it mentions things around lack of awareness or perception or age and demographics and inclusion issues. All of these, no doubt, play a part. And as I say, they're true of that broader skills gap in construction. I think there's also kind of an image problem with the construction industry, which it didn't
Mhm.
mention, but is worth calling out too. But those are not necessarily specific to green skills. Although I have to acknowledge that the sustainability profession is not an especially diverse one. Um, but honestly, I think in addition to all of that, this is basically about underinvestment in green skills. They just haven't been prioritized highly enough by some education institutions, not all, some are very good at it, by policymakers and by industry or industries. I'm not just talking about the built environment here, I'm talking more generally, and certainly not by many recruiters, I would say.
Super interesting. Okay, that's a brilliant synopsis, if you like, and summary, I guess, of those issues at play. How do we next on to the? I'm going to get very simple questions here, Amanda. How do we? Is it as simple as we just need to galvanize that investment? We need to encourage that investment to enable us to address this issue, like, or how else do you see us addressing the issues at play within the built environment sector?
Well, I think first of all, we need to acknowledge just how critical it is that we do address it, right?
Mhm.
To draw on the example I used earlier, take retrofit of existing buildings alone. The built environment's responsible for about 40% of global emissions. 80% of the buildings we use today will most likely still be in use in 2050. So a failure to deliver a large scale program of retrofit for existing buildings is totally going to put our net zero targets at risk. Okay. So if we cannot find or train hundreds of thousands of skilled workers and get them in place in a timely manner, then that puts into question our ability to meet those targets. And I've used retrofit as an example. It's not the only issue. The built environment also needs to address a whole load of other issues, such as its impact on nature, for example. So bringing people into the industry who understand ecology and nature conservation and so on. And I could go on.
Mhm.
Um, and also, I guess we should also acknowledge, thinking about it, that it's not just a huge challenge, but it also offers an opportunity for the construction industry to play its part in what's referred to as the just transition by providing retraining and new jobs for those currently working in kind of higher carbon sectors or, industries like the oil and gas industry. Because the built environment could be a receiver industry for those workers, which would help them close the skills gap that we face and
Mhm.
secure a just transition for those workers, ensuring they're not left behind as we transition away from fossil fuels. So let's not just see it as a huge challenge.
Mhm.
Um, it's also an opportunity, and let's acknowledge that it's urgent. And then, what do we do in terms of addressing the green skills gap? Well, first of all, I would say it's not as simple as we need more courses. There are lots of great training opportunities out there,
Mhm.
including via the CIOB Academy, shameless plug. And take up is growing, but it could still be higher. So we need to think about, of course, scaling up capacity. That's going to be part of
Mhm.
the picture, but also how do we make that training accessible to people who are in existing trades? Okay, not just new entrants to the industry. So that needs to be, thinking about a variety of online and in person, hands on and practical, but also, I guess, really flexible for people who are already in employment full time.
Mhm.
So things like learning on the go, using virtual reality, maybe, suitable for different learning styles. All of that needs to be part of the conversation on how we make this accessible, and especially for people who are already in the traditional trades and want to add this as an additional string to their bow, if you like.
Amanda, it's brilliant. I mean, the clarity that you are describing how we resolve this issue is absolutely fantastic, and it makes you wonder, like, why, what you're describing. It sounds totally plausible. It sounds like something that we can certainly look to address. And I, for one, I'm kind of inspired by what you've just said, which is part of the reason for getting you on. Let me ask you though. I think the article, surprisingly to me, alluded to a number of pieces of research that just essentially suggested that people are just not that interested in green skilled jobs, and green jobs per se. And then also, interestingly, and you've acknowledged it and alluded to it, like when looking at the demographics, like, for example, the shortage of women that are interested in getting into green skilled jobs within the built environment. Like, what do you put that down to? Have we got an image problem when it comes to green skilled jobs?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that, but I think the root of the solution is in what we talked about earlier. That do we really need to talk about green jobs? Shouldn't it be all jobs, are greener, if you like? So
Mhm.
so I think that's where the root of the solution is. Maybe I find it kind of surprising, to be honest, that research, because I get young graduates reaching out to me all the time, looking for a mentor or asking to talk about my journey into a sustainability role, really passionate about sustainability and wanting to get into this area of work. So I have to say, I was surprised when I read the article. Um, but maybe there is an image gap, maybe an image issue, maybe it's around green jobs. Maybe it's around the particular industries that need green jobs.
Mm,
But maybe the solution is in us accepting that this isn't about green jobs, it's about all jobs. We all have a role in this. And I guess, part of the solution might be that we need to kind of incentivize people to look at green roles. And part of that, I mean, we had a kind of manifesto document for the general election at CIOB, as many professional institutions and other organisations will have done. And one of the things that we talked about was the creation of a Green Skills Fund. And
mm,
that's because we really feel that a clear strategy is needed to tackle the gap in green skills in construction. And part of the reason we were calling for a fund was because we need to kind of dedicate resource to developing that pipeline of workers, whether it's retrofit coordinators, heat pump installers, people who are interested in modern methods of construction,
mm,
um, to enable that transition to be realised, and that could cover a whole load of specialist roles as well as training for people in existing trades. and
mm,
and the idea really was that we would allocate that the government could allocate funding to offer training for new entrants, which was free and funded,
mhm,
including through apprenticeships, as well as training to upskill those already in industries, and make it really financially accessible to workers, because maybe the cost of training might act as a barrier for some people, um, and maybe we can incentivize the take up of green skills in some way through that fund as well. I mean, it's really early in the new government to be able to say too much about their positioning on green skills, but we have been really encouraged to see Skills England acknowledge the importance of ensuring that there is a healthy supply of workers with green skills for all industries, including construction. So, watch this space. Maybe they will be inspired by our Green Skills Fund and by the potential for incentivizing people to look at these skills as something that they should add to their overall skill set, really, to be well-rounded prospective employees.
Amanda, I for one think that the way that you positioned it, it certainly should, trigger some thinking, some thought, etc. from the skills organisations that play in the UK. Let me ask you a question. I want to ask. We've talked a lot here about kind of the broader like macro environment in which I guess the skills gap, the green skills gap, is currently sort of situated. Can we talk about specifically like businesses, organizations working within the built environment sector, like, and obviously CIOB members and associates? What would be your advice to them as organizations looking to contend with the green skills gap? Is there anything they can do? Is there anything that they can, any approaches that they can take? Like, what would be your strategic thinking into how they can address it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, employers need to upskill their teams.
Mm,
With these green skills, whether they're the transferable skills that I mentioned, if they've got any gaps in those areas, or whether they're the technical skills. If we're not developing our teams to ensure that they have the sustainability knowledge and skills that they need to do their jobs, but right now and in the future, we're also not preparing them for an economy that is going to demand this knowledge and these skills in the future. So,
mm,
so we're failing them. So there's a bit of a kind of call to action there for any employers, to make sure that they're taking advantage of any opportunities to upskill their existing teams. But also, I think there's a kind of call to action for recruiters as well, to
mm,
place more emphasis on green skills in the recruitment process. Because if you're getting asked about green skills on your job applications and in your interviews, you are going to invest as an individual in developing your green skills through your own self-led CPD plans as well. So I think there is an emphasis on better recruitment that acknowledges the importance of green skills, not just for those green jobs and the specialist roles, but for all of our roles, if we're serious within our organisations about making this transition.
Out of interest, Amanda, that was absolutely brilliantly positioned. Do you at the CIOB, do you guys have any like interaction with engagement with recruiters, and how does that play out?
Well, I mean, I've certainly had lots of engagement recruiters throughout my career as
Cool.
someone who not only, has changed jobs myself, but also has recruited to a lot of jobs. And I don't think there is enough emphasis on those green skills in general,
Mhm.
and particularly on the technical side of things. There are a lot of candidates that come to you with strong transferable skills and a real passion and interest in the environment and sustainability, but sometimes they are lacking some of those technical skills.
Mhm.
And I think one of the ways that employers can work on that, and individuals also can work on that, is through their memberships to their professional bodies. And this isn't a shameless plug for CIOB. It's something that I didn't mention when we were talking about my career journey. Is that I've been obviously a member of a professional institution for all of that 20 years or most of it, and that's the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. And I've found it really central to my progression to be a member of a professional institution. And I think I've been a full member of IEMA for too many years than I can remember. And a chartered environmentalist since about 2018, I think. And then this year I became a fellow of IEMA. And the role of IEMA in kind of encouraging me on in developing my skills, both transferable and green skills, throughout my career has been really central. And I know that there would be members of CIOB that will say the same, and all of the other professional institutions too. So I can't even remember what the question was, sorry. But I
No,
think it is important for individuals
yeah,
to take on that role. It was about recruiters, that's it. It's come back to me.
yeah.
But also, recruiters should be looking for those memberships of professional institutions, because that is a real, um, you know, quality mark, if you like.
Mm,
If
mm.
somebody's a chartered environmentalist or a full member of IEMA, or whatever industry you're in, the relevant professional bodies for that industry, that is a real sign that they have both the transferable skills and the technical skills that they're going to need to succeed in this kind of role.
Amanda, that was absolutely perfect. I could ask further questions and go on, but can you believe we've actually rattled through 43 odd minutes? So I'm going to finish now with the same question we ask at the end of every show. Amanda, if we were to hand you that magic wand, which has been overly not overly used, it's magic, so it can be used as many times as we like. If I was to hand you that magic wand and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
Oh my God. If I had a magic wand, then I would probably want to use it at a higher level and just, like, I don't know, change the whole of society, collectively reassess what it is that we value. But you're asking me about the commercial world or the corporate
Yeah.
worlds, then I guess my answer is kind of predictable. I would have to use my magic wand to ensure that every financial decision that we take um, would take climate and nature fully into account. So it's no longer possible to profit from the destruction of nature, moving away from the emphasis on short term profit that fails to often look at the long term needs of people and planet. I'm going to be really cheeky and use my reusable wand another time, just quickly,
Go
because I'm going to
on.
give you a skills one as well. On skills and
Excellent.
competencies, right? I would say
Okay.
that we desperately need more systems thinking. Sustainability issues are complex issues and they cut across disciplines, and systems thinking is going to help us to look at that big picture, avoid unintended consequences, and kind of navigate that complexity. And that would surely help us make better decisions, right?
Absolutely, Amanda. And actually, a common theme that's come up on a number of other shows is that whole call to arms regarding collaboration and partnership, and how we need to. And I think that was even alluded to within the article, and how within the realms of dealing with the green skills gap. So yeah, love that. That was absolutely brilliant. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. I know that was like a whistle stop tour. I hope you've enjoyed it. We might see whether or not we can get you back on for another show if you have. But thank you for joining us today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I've very much enjoyed talking to you.